Vox Mundo, English Story Time. Especially slow and clear English for beginners. Original story, The Clockmaker's Promise. Hello, and welcome to another video from Vox Mundo. Today, we will listen to a story in English. The story will be told slowly and clearly, so you can understand and learn new words and sentences. This is a great way to improve your listening skills and enjoy the beauty of the English language. Are you ready? Let's begin. Time is not measured by clocks alone. Sometimes it is held in a promise, one that outlives the ticking of any gear or spring. This is the story of Elias, the old clockmaker of Linden Town. And the daytime stopped for everyone except him. The town of Linden was always quiet. Not the silence of loneliness, but the kind that felt safe. Like an old friend watching over you. On the edge of the town square stood a small, stone building with a crooked sign. Elias' Sons, timekeepers since 1821. Only there were no sons. Just Elias, with silver hair, oil-stained hands, and eyes that had seen more seconds than anyone could count. He lived among clocks, hundreds of them. Big, small, silent singing. Each one alive with its own personality. At exactly 6 o'clock a.m. every day the first chime rang. And at 6:01 a.m. Elias whispered, "Another chance to fix what time forgot." That morning, something changed. Not in the ticking that remained faithful, but in the light that filtered through the dusty glass. It was warmer, softer, almost expectant. Then the door creaked open. A young woman stepped in. Hair like ink, eyes like old books, the kind that remember. She carried a velvet box, and her voice shook gently as she said, "I need time fixed." Elias looked at the box. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and said, "Let me see what's been broken." Inside the box, a pocket watch. But not just any. It ticked, then didn't. Paused. Ticked again. A hesitation. A stutter. Like a heart unsure if it wanted to keep beating. Elias held it to his ear, then to his chest, then closed his eyes. Who did this belong to? The woman answered, "My grandfather." He said it holds the last second he spent with her. That sentence, It filled the room with something Elias had not felt in years. Not sadness, not longing, but reverence. He said time listened. The woman continued, that if you love someone enough, clocks remember for you. Elias gently opened the watch's backplate. Inside, etched by hand, I'll return before the last tick. He smiled. A sad smile, because he had once written the same words to someone long ago. The watch wasn't broken. Not really. It was waiting for a moment, for a reunion, for someone to believe again. Elias looked at the young woman and softly asked, "Are you ready to meet the second your grandfather never used?" She nodded, tears forming. Not because she understood, but because her heart did. He turned the gear 3 times, and time, for just a second, stopped, and then began again, in that blink between stillness and sound. A wind stirred inside the shop, though no window was open. The clocks, all of them, chimed together, but softly, like a whisper. The pocket watch glowed faintly, and for a moment, the young woman saw something no one else would believe. A vision, faded like an old photo. Her grandfather standing under a sycamore tree, smiling at someone whose face was turned away. And then just like that it vanished. But not the warmth. That lingered. She clutched the watch. "Thank you," she whispered. But Elias only nodded, his eyes still on the place where the vision had been, because he had seen it too, and he recognized her that night, long after she left. Elias returned to his workbench, but instead of oil and gears, he placed something else on the table. A letter yellowed with age, unopened, unsent. The name on the front, Mira Thorne, with trembling fingers. He opened it for the first time in 50 years. Inside, only one line. "I'll return before the last tick." The same words etched into the pocket watch. Elias closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. Some promises aren't broken. They're just waiting for time to catch up. The next morning, Lyndon awoke, but the clocks did not. They were frozen at 6:01 a.m. And yet the birds still sang. Children still ran. Life continued, but time did not. In the square, people gathered, and they whispered, "The clockmaker is gone." Inside the shop, everything remained untouched, except for one thing: a single gear missing from the grand tower clock, and a note left behind in Elias's handwriting. Sometimes time must pause so the heart can move forward. The young woman returned 1 week later. She didn't knock. She just sat in the same chair as before. The silence was deeper now. Not heavy, but sacred. She held the watch again. It ticked smoothly now. No stutter, no pause. And when she pressed it to her ear, she heard laughter. Not her own. Not Elias's. But 2 voices laughing together. "Thank you," she whispered once more, "for fixing more than time." Years passed. The shop remained, but the clocks inside it ticked differently. Not by gears, not by pendulums, but by memory. People said if you brought something precious to the shop, you could hear the second you thought was lost. A goodbye, a laugh, a chance, a promise. And over the door, carved into the wood, there were new words. Before the last tick, there is always time for love. And that was the final gift from the old clockmaker, the man who fixed time by remembering how to feel it. One rainy afternoon, the young woman returned with a box. Inside it, an old photograph. 2 children, a boy and a girl, laughing under a sycamore tree. On the back, a scribbled note. Summer 1947 EM. Her breath caught. She turned it over again, and this time she knew. Elias and Mira. But what shook her the most was the face of the little girl, because it looked exactly like her. Not similar, identical. How could that be? How could time loop like this? Unless it wasn't a loop, but a continuation. She placed the photograph beside the pocket watch. The second she did, the air shimmered. The grand tower bell outside, silent for decades, rang once, just once, and then all the clocks began ticking again. But not just in the shop. Across Linden, church bells, pocket watches. Even digital clocks blinked, then resumed, as if Elias himself had given them permission. Time hadn't broken. It had just been remembering. Strange things began to happen. Beautiful things. A woman who'd forgotten her wedding day found the ring in a drawer she'd cleaned 100 times. A child with no memories of her father heard his voice on an old cassette that suddenly worked. Time wasn't just a line anymore. It was a bridge. And the clockmaker had been its builder. In the center of Linden, they raised a statue in his honor. Not of him, but of two hands holding a single gear. And on its base, 3 simple words. He remembered everything. One night, many years later, an old woman stood outside the shop. Her hair was silver, her back slightly bent, but her eyes, they knew. She stepped inside, the bell above the door still chiming like it always had. Everything was untouched, and yet everything was different. She walked to the counter, opened a drawer, and inside, a note she had never seen. In Elias's handwriting. You came back, I knew you would. Her hands trembled. Her heart did not. She smiled. And for the first time in her life, she felt right on time. She sat at the workbench, just like Elias once did. Placed the watch down and opened the back. Instead of gears, inside was a folded piece of paper. One last message. You are the next clockmaker. And then the ticking stopped. Not in silence, but in completion. Outside, time moved forward. But inside that little shop, time had fulfilled its promise. She looked up, smiled through tears, and whispered, I'll keep the gears turning. And that was how time, for once, kept its word. If this story stirred your heart like the ticking of a long-lost clock, leave us a like. Subscribe to Vox Mundo for more stories that echo through time and remind you that every second matters. Turn on the bell so your next adventure doesn't pass you by. And tell us in the comments, what part of your past would you revisit? If time gave you one more chance? Thank you for listening. Until we meet again, keep your soul ticking.